Hey folks, this is Rhykker with the Diablo 3 patch 2.6.1 Season 15 Crusader build guide. Now, with Season 15 being the season of double bounties, and with Roland set being the starter set through Haedrig's gift for Season 15 for Crusaders, I figured I'd bring you folks a Crusader Roland bounty guide. Now, if you folks are familiar with my tier lists, and if you're not, I encourage you to check that out, then you'll know that the best Crusader build is a Condemned Crusader. And I would have to say that the same applies for speedruns. Roland's set is significantly weaker, but still viable. And given it is the starter set of Season 15, you'll likely find yourself running this set for at least a little while. But if you enjoy the playstyle, there's no reason you can't run it throughout the entire season. So let's take a look at the gear, starting by looking at the Roland set. For the 2-piece bonus, every use of Shield Bash and Sweep Attack reduces the cooldowns of your laws and defensive skills by 1 second. In this case, we'll be building a Sweepsader. Reducing cooldown will be very important for this build. Our 4-piece bonus is real simple. Increase the damage of sweep by a whole lot. And then the 6-piece bonus becomes interesting. Every use of sweep attack that hits an enemy grants 50% increased attack speed and 15% damage reduction for 8 seconds. This effect stacks up to 5 times, so this is a momentum-based build. In other words, the difference between 0 stack and full 5 stacks is enormous. That's the difference between 0% damage reduction and 75% damage reduction. That makes this build a little squishy when you don't have your stacks up, when you need to first build up that momentum, and that is one of the weaknesses of this build. As for the attack speed, you're building up to 250% increased attack speed, and that's actually one of the really fun parts of this build, seeing that sweep attack get faster and faster and faster. So of course, we're gonna need the full 6-piece bonus of Roland set to run this build. But we also need some other very important supporting items, including the Golden Flens. This boosts the damage of sweep attack, but more importantly, it allows sweep to restore wrath for every enemy hit. Sweep attack costs a lot of wrath, and we're not going to run with a generator in this build, so we need a way of regaining wrath. When we're in the thick of things, fighting a whole group of enemies, we're virtually going to have unlimited wrath, which is great, but when we're up against a single boss, that's when we have a bit of a hard time, and we'll get to that soon. The other item we'll want is a Denial. Each enemy hit by your sweep increases the damage of your next sweep by a bunch, stacking up to 5 times. This is all the more reason why this build works so well at dealing with crowds. Against a single target, you're only gaining a max of 125% increased damage on your next sweep, but against a group, if you're hitting at least 5, then we're looking at 625% increased damage. So this build definitely does a lot better running T13 Rifts than it does in bounties, but we're going to explain some ways of making it better for Rifts, making it better for bounties. Then all of our other items are simply being used to strengthen this build. In our jewelry slot, we're going to want an Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac. This is going to further help with those cooldowns because a resource spending attack such as sweep attack will be triggering it, and since we're going to be turbo buffing our attack speed, that's going to be a lot of procs on our Orots. There are 2 other rings that are going to help us out, and ultimately the ideal will be to have the Orots in the cube, the Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac. But if you have a really good Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac and the other 2 rings you have are far inferior, or specifically the Avarice Band, then you can always put the Avarice Band in the cube. The Stone of Jordan you need to have equipped. So, Stone of Jordan, because it rolls with elemental damage, and it also rolls with increased damage versus elites, which we really need because we have that particular susceptibility to things like bosses. So you really want to be wearing a Stone of Jordan, and then ideally equipping an Avarice Band, and the Avarice Band forms one part of the speed running trifecta of items that turbo boost your defenses. That would be the Avarice Band, the Gold Wrap, and the Boon of the Hoarder. Why? The Gold Wrap lets you gain armor every time you pick up gold. The Boon of the Hoarder makes you pick up more gold, and the Avarice Band increases your pickup radius every time you pick up gold. Therefore, it's going to be swallowing up all gold on screen at some point, which is very helpful for speedrunning so you don't have to actually go around picking up all the gold. Now we're also going to throw in an Aquila Cuirass. Again, we need more sources of damage reduction because this build can be very squishy, particularly during its vulnerable state when it does not benefit from the 6-piece Rolands buffs. And when we're attacking multiple targets, we'll basically always be above 90% primary resource and thus always benefiting from the Aquila. Again, the trouble comes when we're fighting bosses. In our cube, we'll want an Ingam. Every time we kill an elite, we're going to reduce our cooldowns by 10 seconds for 15 seconds. We're going to have a lot of cooldown powers, so this is going to be really helpful, particularly for Speed T13. This will help us chain elite kill after elite kill, because we're going to have basically infinite ponying around to dash from elite to elite, and in order to spawn more elites, we'll also want Nemesis Bracers. If you can't reach an elite, you can at least reach a shrine or a pylon. Now, if you find in bounties the Nemesis Bracers aren't helping you as much, you can go with Strong Arm Bracers instead for more damage, making enemies take up to 30% more damage after being affected by a knockback, which this build will have available to it. And while it's not really advised, if you want to also swap out your Ingam, you can take a Furnace. That'll really help with the boss kills. This is a sacrifice that'll make you go slower, but let's say you're about to do a boss bounty. You're right at the door. You can always make a quick swap from an Ingam to a Furnace to just help with that boss. Now for our rings, we already mentioned the Boon of the Hoarder. Apart from that, we're going to want a Bane of the Trapped. Excellent damage buff, arguably the best gem in the game, and we'll also take a Bane of the Powerful. And honestly, even if you're not benefiting from it at all times, which might be the case in bounties, your buff might drop off if you're not able to find that next elite pack. It's still giving you a 15% increased damage bonus against elites and 15% damage reduction versus elites, which is very helpful to make up for one of this build's weaknesses. Alright, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what stats you want on every piece of gear, let's take a look at the skills. Now, our main attack here will be Sweep Attack, but you have a choice between two runes. Here we have Gathering Sweep. The advantage of that is twofold, and it all stems from the fact that it will pull in enemies. So, by pulling in enemies, if you're running with strong arms, that's going to trigger the strong arm bonus. Also, it helps build up density. The alternative would be Blazing Sweep. This just flat out deals more damage and is actually the rune used for Greater Rift pushing. At the end of this video, we'll link you folks to the best Greater Rift pushing variant of this build. So the choice is yours in whether you're going for Blazing Sweep or Gathering Sweep. Just bear in mind that you have Holy on one and Fire on the other. So, depending on what Stone of Jordan you get, what rolls you get on your Bracers and Amulet, you want to ensure that you're dealing one elemental damage type. So that might influence your decision. If you get a really good Fire Stone of Jordan, and you can't even get a Holy Stone of Jordan, then definitely go with Blazing Sweep. Because we have another skill, Condemn Vacuum, that will partly do what Sweep Attack, Gathering Sweep does. We'll be using Condemn Vacuum not as a damaging skill as in the Condemned Crusader, but simply as crowd control, bringing in enemies. This will also trigger Strong Arm Bracers if you happen to be running them. While it might seem like a bit of overkill to have Condemn Vacuum and Gathering Sweep, again, this build is at its best when it's able to pull in a bunch of enemies around it and hit a ton of them because of all of the various buffs that you're able to stack from hitting multiple enemies and just the raw advantage of being able to strike all of your enemies around you at once, dealing damage to all of them. Next, we're going to take Akarat's Champion, Prophet. Not only does this increase our damage and our toughness, it also increases our Wrath generation, which is very helpful for a thirsty build like Sweep. Our Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac will help greatly in trying to maintain as much uptime as possible on Akarats. For mobility, we're going to take Steed Charge Endurance. On a 16-second cooldown, being able to pony around for 3 seconds, less the 10-second cooldown reduction from Ingam, will leave us with 3 extra seconds if we have 0 cooldown reduction, but we got plenty of cooldown reduction, so after killing an elite pack, you'll be able to chain Steed Charge after Steed Charge after Steed Charge. For even more added move speed, we're taking Iron Skin Flash. Not only does this grant us damage reduction, but it makes us move faster if we take damage with Iron Skin active. We're going to want to maintain this as much as possible while we're expecting to get hit. And then lastly here, we've got Laws of Valor Unstoppable Force. Passively, this increases our attack speed, but while it's active, It'll further increase our attack speed, but also reduce the wrath cost of all skills by 50%. This becomes important versus single targets. Without this, I found it pretty difficult to maintain my wrath against a boss. But otherwise, for T13 Rifts, or if you're otherwise not fighting bosses, Laws of Hope Wings of Angels is the better choice. The passive bonus of Laws of Hope allows you to regen health, the active allows you to absorb a degree of damage, but most importantly, Wings of Angel gives you a huge move speed buff, and that's the main reason for taking it for speedrunning. Onto our passives, we're going to want to take Long Arm of the Law. This effectively doubles the duration of our laws, be it Laws of Valor or Laws of Hope. The cooldown on this is 30 seconds, so lasting 10 seconds still leaves us with a lot of downtime, so we're really trying as much as possible to maintain that uptime on our laws, and this will be aided by our cooldown reduction and our Ingum. We're going to take Finery. This is just an excellent, possibly the best passive for Crusaders. Gain 1.5% strength for every gem socketed into your gear. This includes legendary gems as well. We need to take Heavenly Strength because we're using a Golden Flens, which is a two-handed weapon that we want to wield in one hand, and we also need to wield a Denial. Then lastly, we're taking Indestructible because, again, this build is rather squishy. Prophet will give us an extra life, but this is definitely a scenario in which we will need that extra life. Now, as for our fifth passive with the Hellfire Amulet, if you're going for the Holy variant, you can go with Holy Cause, more damage, and you heal yourself whenever you deal holy damage. You can also just take Holy Cause to benefit from the added damage, even if you're not running the Holy Rune. But if you're not running the Holy Rune and you feel you need some more sustain, you can go with Wrathful. Every time you spend Wrath, you'll heal. Alright, let's revisit the gear and the best stats on every piece of gear. In the video description, I'll have a quick reference link to the D3 Planner showing all the best stats that you want. On your shoulders, you'll want Strength, Vitality, All Resist, Cooldown Reduction. On your helm, Strength, Crit Chance, Sweep Attack Damage, and a Diamond for Cooldown Reduction. For your amulet, ideally you'd like a Hellfire. It's not mandatory though. If you have some other amulet, perhaps an Invulnerability amulet, that rolls better than a Hellfire, you can always go with that. The fifth passive is nice to have, but not as mandatory as in certain other builds. Regardless, the stats that you'd want are Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and Elemental Damage, either Holy or Fire depending on what rune you're running. For your chest, you want Strength, Vitality, Life percent. For your gloves, Strength, Crit Chance, Crit Damage. Then you can go with either Vitality or Cooldown. Having more Cooldown is always better, however, you might find yourself wanting that extra bit of Vitality, and this is one place where you can afford to take it. For your bracers, Elemental Damage, Strength, Vitality, Crit Chance. For your belt, Strength, Vitality, Life, All Resist. For your pants, Strength, Vitality, All Resist. And in both your pants and your chest, you'd ideally want rubies for more damage. For your boots, you want Strength, Vitality, Sweep Attack Damage, and All Resist. For your Avarice Band, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, Cooldown Reduction. For your Stone of Jordan, Elemental Damage, Increased Damage versus Elites, and Cooldown Reduction. For your weapon, Strength, Life per hit, very important for our sustain. Because we're able to hit so quickly, we're regaining a lot of health very quickly. And because this is a two-hander, you're able to stack a lot more life per hit on it than with a one-handed weapon. And the last stat you want is percent damage. And then for the Denial, you want Crit Chance, a socket with a ruby in it, because again, for every socket, we're gaining more strength. And lastly, increased damage versus elites. For our Paragon points, we want to get our total move speed up to 25%. This includes whatever we might have on gear, then dump everything into strength. That said, it's to your preference if you feel you need more vitality or more wrath. For offense, start with cooldown reduction, then crit chance and crit damage, trying to maintain a total 1-to-10 ratio of chance to damage across all of your gear. And lastly, attack speed. For defense, life, all resist, armor, life regen. For utility, resource cost reduction, area damage, life per hit, and gold find. Now that's going to wrap up this video, but remember, if you want a version of this build for Greater Rift pushing, check out this video over here. It's an older video, but in the description we've got a link to the D3 Planner showing all the updated gear and skills that you'll want. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider becoming a Royal Raider on Patreon, where your support is immensely appreciated. We've got a variety of backer rewards, including behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.